Ladies and gentlemen, our luncheon keynote speaker is responsible for the safety and efficiency of the largest airspace system in the world, one that manages 50,000 flights per day and staffs more than 47,000 employees and oversees a $16.4 billion budget, that's with a B. As acting administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, Dan Elwell also supervises the Next Gen program, transitioning our air traffic control infrastructure from ground-based radar to state-of-the-art satellite-based technology. Mr. Elwell has held a wide range of posts that have prepared him for his current set of responsibilities. In addition to FAA Deputy Administrator, he served as the Senior Advisor for Aviation to Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao. Mr. Elwell was the FAA's Assistant Administrator for Policy, Planning, and Environment, and also served as a legislative fellow for the late Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska. However, his aviation experience extends far beyond the halls of government. Mr. Elwell is a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, but what I find most impressive about him is he also spent 16 years as an airline pilot. It's fair to say that he understands the importance of having two well-trained, properly rested pilots in the airline cockpit, and it is a true privilege to have him with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Acting Administrator Dan Elwell.
So thanks, Tim. I see you consulted my mom for those introductory remarks. And if I can return the favor, let me just say to all you folks that I've had the chance now to work with Tim for the last 18 months since I've been back to DOT. And there's no question in my mind that ALPA has been very well served from his leadership. So you guys have been lucky during his tenure. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start also with a thank you. This annual Air Safety Forum is a big reason we are as safe as we are. I cannot overstate ALPA's contribution to raising the safety bar. You know, even though at American APA we weren't part of ALPA, I felt that way about ALPA's safety leadership for the whole 16 years that I was at American. And I feel that way now. You are heavy lifters, always have been. We're counting on that. Everybody in the system counts on that. And by and large, you know, when the average Joe is talking about how safe the system is, they're talking about you. Now I'm back for round 2 at the FAA, which is a real honor and very humbling. I'm not sure if many of you know this, but we're hitting a big milestone this month. The FAA is turning 60, hard to believe, especially since over half of that time I've been flying around. And it has me reflecting on how far we've come, not only as an agency, but as a community. You know, aviation had a rough start. It certainly didn't start out as anything close to the safest form of transportation in the world. But barnstorming has given way to the gold standard. Trial and error, tragedy and sacrifice, those are the watchwords of a pioneering era that passed into the night a long, long time ago. Over the last 20 years, commercial aviation fatalities in the U.S. have decreased by 95%. And I'm not going to stand here and claim that everything good that's happened in aviation safety over the last few decades is thanks to the regulator, thanks to FAA, because it's not true. But how did we do it? Now, my colleague from PHMSA, Skip Elliott, said it yesterday. I think he put it pretty well. Regulation alone cannot achieve the kind of results we demand from aviation. We are as safe as we are today because we collaborate. Airlines, pilots, manufacturers, mechanics, and yes, the FAA. It's old news to everybody here ASRS reports, ASAP reports, VDRP, FOQA. This is the culture that we came up in. In a lot of ways, it's all we know. But every decade or so, this catches the attention of folks who aren't in the aviation business. Congress, the press, your cranky uncle, they scratch their heads. What do you mean the government is working with the airlines? Aren't they supposed to be regulating those guys? I get it. I get that thinking, that thought process. But the relationship that exists between the FAA, ALPA, and the rest of the industry that we regulate is the driving force behind our unprecedented safety record. And I'm sure some of you have been following the developments in the automated vehicles world. It's hard not to. And just about every week, there's a new story about which company will be the first to market or who's got the best tech or the safest systems. And we don't do that in aviation because we don't compete on safety. When an incident occurs in the system, it doesn't just happen to one airline, it happens to all of us. It shakes the public's confidence in the entire industry. So we all know safety isn't just good for business, it's our only business. That's why we have worked together to create a safety culture that is built on 3 key ideas. The first is voluntary reporting. In order to keep improving our procedures, we need good data. And the best way to get it is directly from you, the people working and flying in the system. We've set up programs that allow aviation professionals to share critical safety data without fear of punishment. And the information we've received has been absolutely invaluable. That leads me to the second pillar of our safety culture, risk management. Once we've collected all this data, we analyze it and look for trends that emerge. Then we identify areas of risk that can be addressed before incidents occur. And that leads us, of course, to the third piece of the puzzle, effective mitigation. Once we find an issue, the question becomes, how do we deal with it? Inadvertent mistakes can often be traced back to flawed procedures or a simple lack of understanding. And in those circumstances, we work with you and the rest of the commercial aviation safety team, in most cases, to develop safety enhancements that will mitigate the risk. Then we monitor the situation and make sure that the solution works. And this has become the most effective way to allow for an open exchange of information while still ensuring compliance. Now, this doesn't mean that strong enforcement is not still a tool available to the FAA. It absolutely is. Voluntary reporting, as you all know, isn't some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. When we find intentionally reckless behavior, flagrant violations, or simply a refusal to comply with corrective actions, we levy fines and we take legal action, and even revoke a company's ability to operate. But of course, that's extremely rare. In most cases, the industry adopts our safety measures voluntarily, for the simple reason that everybody operating within the aviation industry shares the same goal, making our system as safe as possible. And that's allowed us to build an environment of mutual trust. So let me give you an example. Some of you may know this example of what this safety culture looks like in action. Last year, a commercial airline crew landed on a taxiway instead of a runway at an airport without a control tower. The crew voluntarily reported the incident to the FAA. And since they knew they could speak freely without fear of reprisal, they were comfortable discussing exactly what happened. And it turns out the only lights that they saw that night were coming from the taxiway. And thanks to the crew's report, we found that a flooded electrical box had extinguished the runway lights. The problem was fixed before another flight crew could make the same mistake. Voluntary reporting, risk management, effective mitigation. Now, it's important to note this system, of course, only works if each one of those three prongs is functioning properly. Remove any one of them, the whole thing falls apart. So I think it's pretty clear. Working with industry doesn't lower the bar on safety. It's what allows us to raise it even higher. And we're going to need these partnerships more than ever if we're going to tackle the challenges heading our way in the future. We have entirely new classes of users asking for airspace access. Drones and commercial space vehicles are here, and they're not going away. But a lot of these companies don't have experience working in the aviation business. They don't understand the culture we've built and how important it is. So it's incumbent upon all of us to welcome them into the fold and to share the lessons we've learned, especially the lessons written in blood. We also need to make sure we're ready for the dramatic increase in air traffic we're going to see in the coming decades. Last year, IATA forecast that the number of air passengers traveling will nearly double by 2036. That's 7.8 billion passengers worldwide. Now, I don't know how else to say this, but we're going to need a heck of a lot of pilots to fly all those people around. And I know there's some skepticism out there about whether there is a real problem with the pilot supply pipeline. But we can see the trends, and they don't look promising. In the last 10 years, the number of private pilots holding active airman certificates has decreased by 27%. And I was just at Oshkosh last week, and that was big topic of discussion. The number of commercial pilots in the same period has decreased by 21%. The military, which used to be one of our best sources for new hires, is not turning out as many pilots as it used to, and at least the Air Force claims to be 10% below the figures that they need. College aviation programs, they don't have enough instructors to teach new students because they're taking jobs with the airlines as soon as they have enough hours. And only about 40% of commercial airline pilots are under the age of 45. And the huge bubble of B-scale hires in the 80s, of which I was one, will create a tsunami of retirements in the next 5 to 10 years that's going to further deplete the ranks. So some of your employers are already starting to take some action on this with in-house training programs and increased salaries, but this is something we all need to pay attention to. You know, ensuring an adequate pilot supply, that doesn't fall under FAA's jurisdiction. But it is our responsibility to ensure the pilots we do have in the system receive the best training and are held to the highest standards. And we're not going to compromise on that. So if there aren't enough qualified pilots to meet the demand that we know is coming, it's going to reduce potential growth and ultimately impact the system nationwide, and because it's a global shortage globally. And nobody wants that. We also cannot assume the way pilots learn and gain experience should remain static. We don't rest on our laurels. And just like all the rest of safety, our work here is never really finished. We have to look at data, we have to address emerging risks, and we have to consider how advancements in technology should be factored into how we measure a pilot's qualifications. And the FAA has been improving our training standards across all categories for a number of years. And we're going to continue looking at the tools and options available to us so that America's pilots remain the best in the world. And I was just telling Joe, I really like this, and Steve, this Train for Life slogan. I think that's a great way to talk about what we go through as pilots, what you guys go through. It's a lifelong commitment to be as trained as you are and as qualified. But we know that this is a shared responsibility. That's why the FAA is holding an aviation workforce symposium at Reagan National Airport on September 13th. And we're going to be bringing together a wide variety of stakeholders to discuss how we can attract more young people to the aviation industry, improve the quality and efficiency of training, and build better partnerships to support our next generation of pilots and aviation technicians. Now, I know this is a topic that a lot of people care about, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of passionate discussion, and I welcome it. This is a conversation we need to have as a community. It will not be a unilateral discussion. Because the importance of pilot qualifications and training cannot be overstated. We all prepare for the worst case scenario while praying it never comes. And for most of us, thankfully, it doesn't. But when it does, good training can make the difference between life and death. And look what happened with Southwest 1380. If any of us got a situation like that in the sim, we'd call it dial a disaster. Catastrophic engine failure, explosive depressurization, passenger medical emergency. But it was real life. Captain Schultz, First Officer Ellisor, and the crew exemplified great grace under pressure. They got that plane back on the ground. It was a near perfect application of excellent training by an experienced team. And it probably saved a lot of lives. And I can't thank them enough for their professionalism and heroism that day. And that's the real reason for aviation's safety record. It's all of you. You're the pointy end of the spear. Pilots, controllers, mechanics, manufacturers, all professionals. We went more than 9 years without a commercial aviation fatality in the United States. Think about that. That's about 90 million flights, and then a single life lost. A lot of people look at that record and say, wow, that's incredible. And it is. But it's not good enough. It's not good enough for me, and I know it's not good enough for you either. It can't be. Jennifer Reardon, 43 years old, a wife, a mom, on her way back home to her family. I think about her a lot. I think we all do. Aviation is the only form of transportation on the planet where the idea of perfection actually seems within reach. We always have the opportunity to do better, to be better, and we won't stop reaching. Thank you very much.